Ben, we are going to start out with the quarterback conversation for the NFL draft over under. I've set our over under, and we're going to make our picks here and we're going to make the case for it. We're also just going to talk about the quarterback position. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of fluid information out there right now as well.
Hmm.
So we're going to dive into this handful of teams and handful of players here at the quarterback spot. But the over under I set for us tonight is 4.5. All right. So I pretty much set these lines. I look at some of the sports books out there. I look at some of the like player over under draft slots, but I try to make this about, what'll be a fun conversation for me and Ben. So I set this at 4.5, Ben. Do you think we have over 4.5 quarterbacks go in the first round tomorrow night or under?
I'm taking the over on that. So I've got it at 5 is where I'll be. I'm hearing people mention 6. I kind of don't think that's going to happen. Where I usually get my quarterback over unders is quite simply how many teams are heading into the draft with what I wouldn't be comfortable as a starting quarterback for a few months later. That's kind of where I set it. Last year, one reason that I was so off on Will Levis wasn't just because I'd watched his tape, but there just weren't as many teams sitting out there. There was
Hmm.
like 2 or 3 teams that I was like, man, they're that's it. Everybody else is set quarterback if they need to be. Well, you look at it this year, the top 3 teams, obviously all 3 need quarterbacks just right off the bat, man. So it's gobble, gobble, gobble right there.
Hmm.
You could definitely see the Giants at 6 possibly doing something, but they don't have to. But even if you forget them, man, you got the Vikings who there is no chance they're coming out of this draft without a
Yeah.
quarterback. Somehow, some way, they're going to get one. And then you have the Broncos and Raiders right there at 12 and 13. So that's six. Let's push the Giants to the side for a second. That's 6 teams that definitely need
Hmm.
a quarterback. Period. You could kind of sort of say, well, the Raiders maybe kind of sort of have something. They do, but hey, they're looking at quarterback too if the right one falls. So that's 6 teams just right off the bat, and that's assuming that the Saints do nothing. That's assuming the Cowboys do nothing. That's assuming that I'm forgetting somebody here, but that's assuming that there's no surprises, right? So that's where I'm coming from. It's not that I truly think that everybody thinks all these quarterbacks are so wonderful, but when you have that many teams who could use a quarterback, and there's some decent quarterbacks in the draft this year, I'm going to take the over of 5.
So obviously the crux of this, and you're saying 5. Michael Penix Jr. is your number 5, I believe, correct?
He would be mine, but if I figure statistically, if somebody didn't like him, they
Between
grab
him
Nix.
or Bo
Yeah,
Nix, you think there's a better than average chance that one of those two guys is going to go. So
I figure so.
I've gotten closer on the Michael Penix idea since our mock last week. So in our mock last week, we had 4 quarterbacks go in the top 4 picks. I believe we
Yes.
had a team trade to number 4. Yep. So we had quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you mentioned that the Vikings, right? They can't come out of this without a quarterback. And in our mock, they stuck at 11 and took Michael Penix Jr.
Yeah.
Now I hated it when it happened. I despised it.
Right.
Um, because generally the makeup of Michael Penix Jr. in terms of his time in college does not translate to success in the NFL. You talk about being in college for a long time. You're talking about 1 to 2 years of high level production. And you're talking about multiple major injuries, right? And all for a quarterback that doesn't use his athleticism, which we learned he's got this crazy 40 time, but he's a pocket passer, right? He's a stand in the pocket and throw lasers, right? That's who this guy is. And generally that doesn't work. Here's where I've kind of come around on that. He spent 5 years in college, but those first 3 years, maybe even yeah, those first 3 years when he was at Indiana, those were all injury seasons. Like he didn't play a full season any of those years. This isn't Bo Nix, who was a 5 year starter for 2 different programs, right? Bo Nix, I don't watch college football. Even I knew when Bo Nix kept going back to school, I was like, is this guy ever gonna leave? Like he transferred? I thought he was graduate. How are we doing this? So at least Michael Penix is a little bit of the Joe Burrow, right? A couple years at one program for different reasons, never became the full-time long-term starter. So then went to another school, got another year of eligibility, played a fifth season, and then, broke out. And Penix compared to a Jaden Daniels Kenny Pickett had two really good years of production, right? So he's kind of more on that track of okay, there's a little bit of something here. I still don't love still the makeup of it. I still don't love everything that I see when I do watch. I didn't do as much work on Penix as the other four guys, I'll be honest, because not until the last 2 weeks was I like, man, this is a guy that is going to go round one, right? Except everyone made the Raiders jokes where, generally, and we'll talk about him in the Raiders later, I'm sure, but if it's like the Raiders might take this guy in the first round, then they're pretty much the only team to do it, so you don't really have to think too hard about it. So you also based it not just on your tape because I know you're a fan of Penix. You base it on you see at least six true quarterback needy teams, and all those teams you mentioned are in the top half of the draft. So you're not even considering this as one of those trade back into the first round to get the fifth year option kind of deals, right? You're saying true and blue, and maybe there's room for like one of those teams could trade back a few spots, but this isn't oh, I picked a tackle at 13 and now I'll trade two second round picks to take Penix at 29. This is straight up. This could be their pick at 13, the Broncos at 12, or in their first round pick.
That's what I figure. I figure we're looking at stick and pick, whether it's Giants at 6 or whether it's
Hmm.
that little coined phrase quarterback alley there, 12,
Yep.
13 ish area, 11, 12, and
Yeah. 11,
13.
12. Hmm.
I think they're sticking and picking, not because not because they're convinced that these are franchise saviors, but because they need it and there's a guy there. And hopefully a guy there that they do actually like, right? They're not just grabbing a guy, but here's a guy we like. He's here. We need him. We need somebody. So we're gonna move on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and I do like that. And I liked, again, when it was Peyton Davila, who have the two P's on a pod, who took Penix with the Vikings. I like that he took him at 11. He didn't wait till 23, right? Because like
Yeah.
more and more in this day and age, it's about if there's a quarterback that you want and you plug him in, you go get him, right? Because we've decided that even an average to above average quarterback on a rookie contract is one of the most valuable things you can have in the NFL, right? Because if you have filled everything else out decently, and let's just stick with the Raiders for a little bit. They were a top 10 defense after Antonio Pierce became the head coach last year. They have Devontae Adams. They've worked on that offensive line over the last couple of seasons. It's still not where I want it, but they've worked on it. They signed Jacoby Myers last year. They draft Michael Mayer in the second round last year. So they'd have an infrastructure to drop in a quote unquote veteran, right? Rookie quarterback, this 24-year-old rookie quarterback. Um, and if you're paying that as an average amount and you have everything else around them, that makes sense. That said, you did just pay Gardner Minshew, so are you really getting that advantage, right? Now, Gardner Minshew, they can get out of this. Over the cap ad is popping my screen here. They can get out of the Gardner Minshew deal pretty easily, right? They could cut him after this season, and he's got a dead cap hit of $7.5 million. So over the course of Michael Penix's rookie deal, or whoever, if they were to take somebody, they would still be paying a rookie contract quarterback for the majority of that time. Um, so there is a real world where, from a team structure standpoint, that would make sense. I started that spiel by talking about this trade back into the first round fallacy, and I got off track there. Um, I asked you about trading back into the first round because I did look into this since I've started paying attention to this stuff with the NFL, I hear this in the media a lot, and from even more from fans, I'd say, than the media. This trade back into the first fallacy, right? Which I'm going to coin that for use in a future episode of ours. In the last 10 years, there have only been two quarterbacks that have been drafted at the end of the first round by a team trading back into the first round. And that was Baltimore for Lamar Jackson in 2018 and Minnesota for Teddy Bridgewater in 2014. That's it. All right. And quarterbacks taken like even 20 or later, right? That barely happens. We had Kenny Pickett go 20 to the Steelers. Paxton Lynch, the Broncos traded from 31 to 26, I think, to take him in whatever draft that was. But otherwise, you're not getting quarterbacks at the back end of the first round, right? That's just not happening. So when a lot of people are doing this kind of exercise and like how many guys are going to go, they might say, well, you've got your top four, and then maybe somebody sneaks back in for Penix at the end of the first round. We said this about Hendon Hooker last year, right? Hendon Hooker was the guy that we were talking about because
Mm-hmm.
most people just thought Will Levis was a first round pick, but it just doesn't happen historically. And even with Will Levis, who is now a starter and was an early second round pick, the Titans didn't trade back into the first round to go get him, right? They moved up within the second round to get him, but they weren't like, we have to go get that guy, right? So teams don't do this. So if you're saying, and you are, if a listener or somebody is out there saying, I think five quarterbacks go, it better be because you think someone's going to take Penix in the top 15, 16, 18 so picks.
Yeah, it really is. The list in the second half really thins out. I mean, boy, I've heard the Rams connected to a quarterback. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really see that in the first round. I figure maybe if the guy's sitting there in the second round, they do it, which is exactly what you're saying. In some world, man, that's kind of it. I've already mentioned the Saints and the Cowboys, which will be major surprises. I don't
Yep.
expect it, but in some second round world, you never know. But yeah, I think they pick them early, or they don't pick them at all. And I didn't know that statistic that you had pointed out just a second ago about trading back in, that it's only happened, what, twice in the past 10 or 12 years. I did
Yep.
not know that.
Yep.
But it does make sense that basically NFL teams either see the guy they want and they can get him, or they don't. If they either get a guy later or they get the guy early.
Right. Yeah, to your point about the Rams, I definitely heard a lot of that early on in the draft process, but then Aaron Donald retires, so then it's like, okay, they need to kind of push in on defense. So I think that's where people have settled. But yeah, that there's an outside chance of something like that happening if they fall in love with a guy. Um, so now to kind of help us with this exercise and move through the quarterback conversation a little bit more, let's talk about some good team fits for each of these guys. And it can be based on anything. It can just be based on vibes, it can be draft position and capital, it can be team makeup, all of that. So I listed the six guys, right? Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix. I even threw Bo Nix in there. Um, what are some of the fits we could see for this? Obviously, Caleb Williams, I just wrote down the Bulls, right? Any other any other teams you wanna throw in the mix there? He seems like a pretty good fit for them, I think. Um, Drake May and Jaden Daniels. That's a whole conversation between those two teams. What are the teams though that you can really see those two guys actually going to? And just focus on, where could you actually see them landing when tomorrow night rolls around?
So you mentioned the keys, realistic, right? So
Right.
in a vacuum, the Vikings to me are by far and away the most ideal choice, and not even close. If I'm a young quarterback, I want to go there. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I get to play in a dome. It's a reasonably tough division, but it's not brutal compared to other divisions I might enter into.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Justin Jefferson, who might be the best receiver in football. I've got two good tackles. I've got an aggressive defense. I mentioned playing in a dome. I've got a pretty good coach who at least seems to know
Mm-hmm.
what he wants to do. We can argue about where he fits in the pantheon, but there's a lot there. But listen, Drake May and Jaden Daniels aren't going to fall there, so the Vikings would have to trade up, and they haven't
Yep.
done that yet.
Yep.
So doesn't seem super realistic. So if I'm Drake May and Jaden Daniels, I just don't want to go to New England, which means I want to go to Washington. That's
Yep.
really what I'm looking at. I don't want to go to the Patriots. I want to go to Washington, and then I'm kind of sort of hoping maybe somebody trades up into the Patriots spot, like the Giants, or maybe the Vikings take that plunge and do it. I just don't want to go to the Patriots. That's kind of my big thing there. And I know that's not exactly fit, but boy, that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah. I would not want to go to the Patriots either. I do not think that would be a fun time, especially because both guys should start right away, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. But neither guy is really one of those like I'll let him sit and let the team take its lumps for a year candidates. Um, if the draft goes the way we're thinking, right? Williams goes one. The Jaden Daniels stuff. I'll talk about the odds stuff here for a second. Odds have been very favored to Jaden Daniels going to the Commanders for a while now, right? Last week, the week before the draft. it starts evening out a little bit, right? And a lot of that I think
Yes.
was because of the whole Top Golf thing, which is just incredible. I love that.
Yes.
Just take all the guys to Top Golf and see what happens. And the response coming out of that, like it wasn't just like they all went into Top Golf and then they came out and the odds all shifted. No, it was like we were getting reports that Daniels like hated it and he was really put off by it and he didn't like it and he didn't want to go there anymore. And Drake May's doing interviews with Schefter, and he's like, "It was great. We were hanging out. I thought I was the best, but also this guy was great." And it was just like, all of what we're getting right now is exactly what this Top Golf event was supposed to flush out for everybody, right? And so it's just like, meanwhile, while Top Golf is happening, everyone's getting on Twitter and they're like, "Gosh, the Commanders, they can't stop stepping over their own feet. They're so dumb." Yeah, and it's like, these guys know what they're doing. They got it. They got exactly. But after all that kind of died down, Jaden Daniels has once again become the very heavy favorite to go two overall. So let's say it does play out this way. Williams goes one, Daniels goes two. Then I think we get full stop. Everybody's trying to make that trade to the Patriots, right? The Vikings are going to put it all on the table. The Giants will put a little something on the table potentially if they really want to. If the Broncos and the Raiders are really trying to get in it, that's when they'll put it all. But if the Commanders take Drake May at two, and then Jaden Daniels, then I think it's gonna be crickets. I think it's gonna be crickets because I think Daniels, you need to run something specific, not because he wouldn't be good without a lot of QB design run stuff, but I think you need to do that to take full advantage of all of his traits, right? All of his strengths. And I think less of these teams that we're talking about are going to be the types of teams that are willing to do that. So I mean, you could see like the Vikings, right? Or not the Vikings, the Raiders, because of that Antonio Pierce connection, right? He was an assistant coach at Arizona State and was the main guy recruiting Jaden Daniels to the school. Um, so maybe that becomes the kind of the lone team that would try to jump in to New England or and see what happens there. Because then after that, if when once New England takes somebody, then you're dealing with a bunch of teams that are trying to trade out of the pick, and then you never know what's going to happen. Um, but yeah, I'm with you. I mean, those are the three teams, right? Washington, New England, Minnesota seem the most realistic and the most correct for those guys, and it's really just a question of who does Washington take, and then does Minnesota present the Godfather offer to go to three to get one of these other get the other guy, whoever it ends up being.
I almost wish, and again, this is looking from afar. I almost wish that the Patriots and the Vikings would do everybody a favor here and work out some kind of a not killer Godfather offer, just some kind of an offer where everybody comes away happy. Because the Patriots, what are they going to do with the quarterback right now if they get one? They don't have anything to support him. It's a brand new coaching staff, which may be very capable, but it's going to take them time to get everything going. You got this guy; he's going to be playing in freezing temperatures come, late October, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, I just don't see that going well for the first year or two myself. But the Vikings are ready. The Vikings are ready right
Yep.
now. So I kind of wish these two teams would work something out. Maybe they can't, but I wish they would for all
Yeah.
parties concerned.
So that takes us to the next guy, and I'm with you. Like I think I just can't wait to see where Drake May goes because I'm gonna be all in. I hope it's the Commanders for them, and I am historically very hard on the Commanders because I have a lot of people in my life who really care about them, being from Virginia, and I would just love Drake May to be there. But if not, if he's in Minnesota, that would be great. Um, let's move to JJ McCarthy, right? Let's go to number four here on the list because when I was picking for the Patriots last week, I did no work on the phones before the draft. I was completely taken by surprise that Drake May did go two overall in our mock. I sat there holding the bag, very upset. But I took JJ McCarthy for the reason that you said. What are you going to do with a rookie quarterback for the Patriots right now? So if I'm staring down the barrel of JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels, give me the 20-year-old, give me the 21-year-old, whatever he is, that I really have no pressure to play at all in year one, right? Um, I'm not usually a proponent of this, but JJ McCarthy being such a young player who got so few reps as a thrower at Michigan is the perfect end for a team that has nothing. Just the Patriots got nothing going on, no offensive line. No wide receivers, no true run game to speak of, a defense that you're not 100% sure what it's going to look like without a Belichick for for the first time in 20 years, 20 some odd years. He's going to sit all year behind Jacoby Brissett. And I'm going to be bad, but I'm not going to be as bad as I am now
Yeah.
because Brissett is going to be better than Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi. And I'll take my, wide receiver in the second round, and I'll take my left tackle next year when it's a top 10 pick, and then McCarthy's going to play. Um, that's what I like for McCarthy, and that's kind of if I'm New England and I don't trade out, if I don't make that move for Minnesota, that's what I'm looking at. What do you think about McCarthy? What do you think about him and the Patriots? And then what are some other teams you can see him going to?
So I'm convinced somebody's going to draft McCarthy, and I'm fairly convinced it's going to be somewhere fairly high. And by high, I mean if not that 4 slot, then because somebody's got to trade up there, then somewhere in that 11, 12, 13 range. Somebody's
Yeah.
going to take him somewhere in the first half of the draft. I'm not convinced somebody's going to trade up for him. I feel like Jim Harbaugh has done a pretty good propaganda push
Mm-hmm.
job on this thing. And I feel like there's also another sector that is just like talking McCarthy up because it just adds to the confusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have another sector who really does legit like McCarthy.
Yep.
They really do. But it's a big difference between liking a guy and drafting him versus actually trading up and paying a big price for him. Especially as you said, we don't have a whole lot of tape on him. We just
Mm-hmm.
don't. So that's quite a big difference thing. So I'm not convinced people are going to trade up for McCarthy. I know somebody's going to draft him in the top half of the draft somewhere. And I almost wish it would be the Patriots for all the reasons you just said, man. I mean, if if the team sucks, let him play after Thanksgiving for 3 or 4 games just to get
Mm-hmm.
him that
Yep.
experience. Even though it's not going to go too well, just
Mm-hmm.
get him some experience. But don't play him at the start. But plan for him, support him, build him up. If they throw any quarterback out there for the Patriots to start the season, it's going to be worse than what Carolina went through with Bryce Young last year. At least Carolina had a couple of supports in place. New England has nothing. So McCarthy, even though I'm not huge on him, somebody will draft him in the top half of the first round. And, I wish it would be the Patriots. I wish the Patriots just trade back with Minnesota and pick McCarthy at 11, be done with it. I think they get the picks to kind of support him over the next couple of seasons. And that would be what I would like. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal because if you could make that trade with Minnesota, if they could come up, let's say they take Drake May, and then let's just say nobody took JJ and you could take him at 11, then at 23, you can take one of these tackles, you can take one of these receivers.
Right.
That certainly would be ideal. With McCarthy, for me, I think it was 5 weeks ago now, I got on this podcast with Ronan of the Iron Grid. Make sure you're checking out that podcast. And I was like, I don't get the JJ thing, right? I've read everything. I don't get the JJ thing. I think you mentioned it while you were going there towards the beginning. Somebody in the league, the Vikings, are hyping up JJ to everybody, so Drake May will fall, so they can go get Drake May, right? That's what's
Right.
actually, and then McCarthy completely slips. I was on McCarthy at like 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. I was like him at 18 to the Seahawks, perfect, because he can sit for a year or
Yeah.
even two behind Geno,
Yes.
and they can figure out what they are, and boom, that ain't
Mm-hmm.
gonna happen now. And the reason is because pretty easily, I mean, for me, I'm just a dude finding very cheap all 22 to look at, and I found a couple games from 2023. And in 3 games that I found him from 2023 in my minimal scouting experience, I found 4 or 5 high level throws that he made from the pocket under pressure or out on the move. And I'm like, that's all you need. When you as an NFL team see that, they're like, cool, I can make that happen every game. I can make that happen 3 or 4 times a game. Um, and then the teams and the coaches, they're also really going to care about his winning record. They're going to care that he won 3 state championships in high school and a national championship in college, and he's lost like 5 games as a starting quarterback in his whole life. They're going to care about that stuff, and he's going to go quick. Yeah, it would definitely be ideal for everybody if he fell to 11, whether that was the Patriots or the Vikings or whoever. But yeah, someone's gonna. I guess I shouldn't say they have to come up for him because every team could sit there and just be like, I don't need him. I think his floor would be 6 though, because I think the Giants, you mentioned them, they don't have to do anything, but they could. So I
Mm-hmm.
think they're in a perfect spot. They're kind of like the Colts last year, right? The Colts were just everyone was wondering what they were going to do. Were they going to move up? Were they going to move back? And oh man, the GM's name is escaping me. Anyways, he was just sitting there so cool at all those press conferences. He was like, "We're good. I'm getting my guy at 5. I know it for sure. There's no doubt about it." And that's what the Giants can do here because they're like,
Right.
either McCarthy falls all to us at 6 and we have our escape hatch for Daniel Jones right now, or we take Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that's a good consolation prize, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
I think his floor is 6, which when we talk about trades here in a minute is why I think someone's going to have to come to 3, 4, or 5 to get him. But I think his floor is at 6. So the teams I had for McCarthy were New England taking him at 3, the Giants taking him at 6, or Minnesota jumping up into the top 5 to take him. Those are the teams I can see McCarthy with.
And just to get off the McCarthy thing for a second, real quick, one reason I am so convinced that there's probably going to be 5, I mentioned it's because there's so many teams that still need quarterbacks. And that's why I wouldn't be convinced that teams like McCarthy so much, except that so many of them have come into this draft with an open slot available to draft somebody.
Yep.
And there's only so many somebodies to draft here at quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any team that wanted to, teams really kind of have to make half of these decisions 6 weeks ago, really,
Right.
um, when the free agency season starts. Anybody that wanted to could have had Russell Wilson. Anybody that wanted to could have had Justin Fields. And not too many teams went after those guys. And the biggest reason was there's quarterbacks here that they like. And they really thought, hey, we've got a shot at these guys. Ryan Tannehill's still sitting out there.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody after the draft will sign him. We don't know who. Somebody will, and they'll just go the bridge route for a year. But again, somebody's going to take McCarthy in the first half of this draft because they've got so many open slots available, and there's so few, veterans out there that are worth anything at this point. But teams could have had Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and they let them pass. Why? Because they're going for him here in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. The last 2 guys, we'll go through these guys a little bit quicker. Penix, I had as Vegas. We already talked about 13. Just feels like such a Vegas guy, and I think one of his playoff games was in their stadium, right? So Davis was just sitting up there like, oh yeah, I like this guy. Seattle at 16. I mentioned them before when I was talking about like I could see McCarthy going there. Power struggle within Seattle. What are they doing at quarterback long term? We see them make the trade for Sam Howell, but their OC was Washington's OC, not their head coach, right? It was their OC when made the parallel move, I believe. Because then the head
That sounds
coach
right.
went to
Yeah.
Alabama or was going out, whatever. I don't care about college football. Connection between Washington, where Penix went to school, and Seattle coaching staff. And then I threw Denver in there, right? Could Sean Payton get a little excited about Penix there? But those are the 3 teams. If Penix was going in the first round, those are the 3 teams I could see. I didn't say Minnesota, mostly just because I'm convinced they get one of those top 4 guys. Um, and I was talking to our pal Josh Lemasand, and he was like, I don't think they want another Kirk Cousins type. I just stand in the pocket, don't really move anywhere, and chuck the ball. Even though Penix probably has a slightly better arm um than Cousins does. It's just like if they were gonna make this breakup with Kirk Cousins, you don't start dating somebody who's exactly the same, right? You're gonna do something different after this long break. So, you know, do something a little bit more. JJ can move, Daniels can move, May can move, even Bo Nix can move. So like maybe not just a stand in the pocket kind of launch. So that's Penix, and then we'll throw Bo Nix in here too. If he were to go, he went in our mock. We had 6 quarterbacks go in our mock. I said Minnesota a second ago just because if let's say that might be the guy they're like at 23. If we don't get anybody by then and he's there, maybe we'll do something. Um, but then Denver as well, and that's where he went in our mock. He feels like he could be a Sean Payton guy. So Penix and Nix. What do you see for those 2?
Penix could go to quite a number of teams, and that could be anywhere from the kind of obvious ones, Denver and the Raiders, to the really quiet assassins, which would be the Saints, Cowboys, and Seahawks. Now, listen, they'll all say, all three of those back end organizations, Saints, Cowboys, Seahawks, they'll all completely deny any interest in any quarterback from now to the history of the end of mankind, right? But behind closed doors, they have to have these conversations, if for no other reason than cover all their bases. And hey, we've got some expensive quarterbacks on our hands who aren't winning playoff games. I mean, for no other reason, you have to have that conversation. So they will be having those conversations. I don't expect a movement from those three teams, but it's always a possibility lurking behind there that, hey, if Penix is sitting there and the guy we really wanted is gone out of, say, the tackles or the wide receivers, then let's grab him. So, again, those are the possible places for Penix. I like Penix, but I do believe he needs to go to a place that's got a decent O-line, got a decent coordinator, got a decent set of wide receiving options. I don't view him as savior of the franchise kind of material. I just don't. But if you get him in the right spot, I do like him to actually have a pretty good career. Nix, I'm going to be surprised. I hear people talking up Bo Nix. I don't see Bo Nix going in the first round, man.
Yep.
That would really surprise me. Is it possible? Yes, but man, that's going to surprise me if it does.
Yeah. Through all this, I don't even know if I said my pick for the over under. I said under the 4.5. I don't think Penix or Nix end up going. I think this is all the Penix is classic. Who's that extra quarterback that can go in? And most people are going to say trade back into the first for him. I don't see it. We've talked through most of the trade scenarios, right? So I'm going to rattle through a few here. If there were any others or any that you particularly like, let me know. But I wanted to see what other trades we can see happening. So the Patriots trading out of 3, I could certainly see. Terrible infrastructure. Um, but I would take Drake May if he was there, and that seems like the most likely thing that's going to happen. Is it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be Williams and then Daniels to the Commanders and then May to the Patriots, and the Patriots cannot trade out of May. We'll get into the start sit conversation after this, but you can't trade out of May. The closer we get, I'm more convinced that the Cardinals are not going to be the trade back team, right? The Monty Austin Fort video is getting recirculated again, and I love that. But I don't think that's because I'm always going to move around the draft, right? I think it's he knows the deal when he sees it and he knows the player that he wants. Um, and I think it's time for them to get another blue chip guy. They made the commitment to Kyler. This team was devoid of talent last year. They still have plenty of picks. Heck, they even have a second first round pick already. They don't need to do the move back to 11, then try to move back up to 5 or 6 to get the receiver. I'm more convinced that they're going to stick and pick at 4. So after the Patriots, I like the Chargers at 5 to potentially trade back and take their linemen. Let's say it's 11 to the Vikings. The Falcons at 8 because they feel like they're going to go defense and they don't need to take a defensive player at 8 overall. So I could see them trading back. But like we said, I really don't think there's going to be a guy. I don't think JJ is going to go past 6, right? And I don't think anybody is going to trade up to 8 to take a Michael Penix. So I like the Chargers at 5. Some trade up teams to think about. Obviously, Minnesota, the Giants we've talked about because the Giants going from 6 to 3 or 5 wouldn't cost a whole lot, especially those guys just want the receiver. So that's more about the Giants just blocking the Vikings. People are having fun with the idea of the Raiders risking it all. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they feel the pressure yet. And the Denver rumors about Sean Payton. Did you see the rumor about like trading 12, their second round pick, and then Pat Surtain to come up to like 3 or something like that? Like,
Yes,
oh,
I did.
like come on, man. Any of those trade teams or any other trades that you thought about stand out, or do you just want to make fun of Sean Payton for a minute?
Tempting as that is, the only thing that stands out, I feel fairly certain that the Chargers at 5 and the Falcons at 8 are both waiting eagerly, blip blip, to trade back. I just don't think there's going to be a strong demand for it. I really don't. I don't think
Yeah.
unless somehow May is sitting there at 5, I just don't think there's going to be a big demand for it. I figure the rest of those teams, because it's QB4 by that time, man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know the odds on QB4 if you're an NFL team.
Yep.
I just don't think those teams are going to be eager to pay the massive price to move up to 5 or 8 to get QB4, even if they like him. I think they're going to risk, hey, we'll stick and pick, and if he's there, great. So, 6 maybe, but if I had to pick odds, I'm on the other side of 6. That either the Giants pick McCarthy at 6 or they pick somebody else at 6, and McCarthy slips. I figured a quarterback alley at 11, 12, 13. Is kind of what
Okay.
I'm expecting. But no matter what, it feels like there's more eagerness to trade down than there is to trade up. Is kind of
Yep.
what I'm sensing.
Yep. Yep. I see. Yeah. It feels like if it's not Minnesota to trade up, then nobody's gonna do it.
Right.
And it makes it all the
Right.
more curious that we haven't had that trade yet. I mean, it's
I know that's
Wednesday
been
at 11
odd.
p.m. Eastern. The Vikings traded for the 23rd pick like 4 weeks ago, and that was when the JJ McCarthy Vikings fan edits all started making their way around Twitter, and nothing. And I really do think it's just because the Commanders, Robertson of Odds On Favorite, said this last week. The Commanders have been so tight-lipped, like nothing other than these odds changing. Nothing's getting out about who they prefer a quarterback. It seems like everybody that has some sort of connection to Adam Peters and co think that he's going to like Daniels, but it's also very obvious that they're all just like, we don't actually know. Like this isn't like, oh yeah, somebody told me this. It's just like we know who Adam Peters is and we think he likes Daniels. And it's just so tight that I think I would be surprised if the Vikings didn't already have an offer into the Patriots, the Cardinals, and the Chargers that each of those teams was well aware of, and they're like, okay, like that's a good framework of the deal. We'll call you, you call us when the board falls at 2. Um, and we'll see what we work out. I'm sure that's already been done, and everyone's just waiting to see if it's actually Drake May or not. Because then for the Vikings, I'd be really interested to know all the avenues they would go of like which quarterback would be worth what to them, right? Would they trade 11, 23, a third, and a future first for May, and then 11, 23, and a future first for Daniels? And then maybe just like if it has to be JJ, like, okay, we'll trade you 11 and 23, but no future picks, right? Because GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa was saying in a press conference recently, like, I know I need to have a walk away price for every trade I want to make. And I have to set that ahead of time, or else you make bad decisions. Now, is he
Yes,
just
you do.
saying that to try to tell teams like, you're not going to get me, but he actually is going to get got? We don't know. We have to wait and see. But that would be very interesting to know.
The Vikings thing has been fascinating because they made that trade to get the second first rounder. They got both of them, and you're figuring, hey, everybody thought, hey, they're moving up. So my thought has been, having watched the silence for the Vikings for the past 2 or 3 weeks, it has been this: when you look at, they know they're not getting Caleb Williams, so that's completely out of the picture. When they look at Daniels and May, I figure they like one of those guys enough to trade up, but not both of them. And like you said, they don't know which guy is going to be sitting there at 3 when the Patriots come. So they've got a deal in place with the Patriots. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced they have a framework with the Patriots in place to where if the guy they wanted, probably May, but whichever guy it is, if the guy they want is sitting there at 3, then they'll make the big offer, move up with the Patriots. My second thought along with that is that they like McCarthy, but not enough to trade up for him. They're willing to risk just sitting at 11 and getting him there, is what I figure is happening. Because if not, if you just know you want a guy and he's somewhere up in 3, then go ahead and make the trade.
Right.
Otherwise, that means there's some kind of a pecking order that you know you want, and you know where you're going to set those prices at.
Yeah. So if McCarthy is a wait till 11, is Penix in that group for you too for Minnesota? Wait till 11, or is he a like wait all the way to 23?
For me, he would be, but for Minnesota, I figure he's not. I figure
Hmm.
they have a pecking order, and I figure they, yeah. See, I figure Penix is a wait till 23 for them.
Is
That's kind
further
of what
back.
I've got figured.
Okay. And then last bit on the quarterbacks here, the team player combinations that would equal them starting right away versus waiting. Now, I am very much in the camp of if you draft a quarterback in the first round, you throw him out there because I'm not going to listen to the outside pressure. And if I draft a quarterback, then I'm making him the leader of my team. So I think he's got the fortitude to like, if you have bad games, dude, I don't care. Like you have to throw interceptions. You have to have bad games. I'm gonna
Right.
do the tired out thing and show him Peyton Manning's rookie year. I'm gonna show him Trevor Lawrence's rookie year and say, don't worry about it. Just go suck. Go suck right now because I don't want you to suck in 2 years or in 4 years when I have to pay you, right? Figure it out. 90% of the time I'm like, start the guy right away. Just do it. Just throw him out there. Because when the fans are mad about it, I'm not worried about it. I don't want him to be worried about it. Didn't work out for Kenny Pickett and the Steelers, but you know what? They got rid of him and they've moved on. So like, boom,
Yes.
wipe your hands of it. 2-year, 3-year experiment. We're out of here. It's over. So here are my combinations. I want to hear your thoughts, and then whatever else you have. Again, I didn't even write down Michael Penix, but Caleb Williams and the Bears is obviously a start right away.
Yes.
I think any team that Drake May goes to is a start right away. I just have a feeling, based on the kind of dude that everyone talks about this guy being, he's one of those, I learn by making mistakes. I learn by doing, right? I don't learn by watching. Like, yeah, that makes sense, man. I can see that. Um, Jaden Daniels, you got to start right away, man. He turns 24 in December. Like, we ain't got time for you to sit and learn, right? That's not happening. I'm also designing an offense based on your skill set that maybe my backup, who I have, can't do. I don't want Marcus Mariota running the stuff I have for Jaden Daniels, even though maybe five
Right.
years ago he could have. It's not happening now. JJ McCarthy doesn't have to start, but I think if he were to go to, let's say, the Vikings, I think he would end up starting right away. I think he would beat Sam Darnold right away. If he went to the Giants, that would be interesting. He probably doesn't start away right away for the Giants. So of the three teams I said for him, New England, the Giants, Minnesota, he probably starts right away for Minnesota. Probably not the Giants or the Patriots, unless the Giants were to work out some kind of draft day trade, right? If they took McCarthy at 6, and then on Friday or Saturday they can trade Daniel Jones for like a fourth round pick or something like that, right? Then, but even then they got Drew Lock, so it's like I could see Drew Lock, getting the first 5, 6 games with McCarthy in the building. Um, and then, yeah, truthfully, I didn't think about Michael Penix, but he's a start right away too, being 24 years old. So I think that's where I'm at. Any other thoughts on any of those guys for you?
I'm pretty much there on almost everything you just said. I'll take it from the team aspect real quick. So if the Bears draft Caleb Williams, he starts right away. Anybody the Commanders draft, they're starting right away. If the Patriots draft May or Daniels, that's starting right away. But if the Patriots trade back and draft
Hmm.
McCarthy, I think it's a sit for a while, like we've already
Yep.
talked about. Anybody the Vikings draft is starting right away. They're ready to win now. They cannot
Hmm.
afford to go sit some guy. None of them can. Jobs are on the line if they don't win. Keep the winning up, right? And then the one other team, the Broncos and the Raiders can afford to sit. So if the Broncos or Raiders somehow just they grab a quarterback, they can afford to let the guy kind of battle it out in camp. If he's good enough to start right away, great. If not, no big deal. We'll start him when we feel like it, right? So that's kind of where I'm at from a team standpoint more than anything.